Let's get started with Blob Storage by taking a look at this from the storage account perspective. First of all, we have our storage account, and you'll need one that supports Blob Storage. In addition, we have our containers, which are inside our storage account. This helps us organize our various blobs and images and data files as we come across them. And finally, we have our blobs themselves, which go inside there. Now, you may be thinking, okay, what is a blob? How is this different? Well, blob is a binary large object. Think of it as your ones and zeros. These could be images, video files, random text files, or whatever they might be. But don't confuse them with files compared to like an SMB file share, for example, which has permissions and other things associated directly from a CIFS perspective. This is for storing large amounts of images, videos, etc. Now, if we look at the storage account types, we have three major types. We have GPV version 1, blob accounts, and GPV version 2. Now, GPV version 2 is the main choice you will use when you create storage accounts in Azure now, because it allows us to do page blobs, block blobs, so we can do all of our images, videos. We can also store VM disks in there as well. We can mix everything in a GPV2 account. GPV1 allowed us to store blobs and other disks as well, but a blob account was specific only for blob storage, and ultimately it was confusing for everybody, so that's going away, and GPV2 accounts are ultimately the direction going forward. You may be asking that, okay, well, what is the difference between a block blob and a page blob? So a block blob, again, is ideal for storing text or binary files. Again, those are those images and video files. A single block blob can contain up to 50,000 blocks of up to 100 meg each for a total size of 4.75 terabytes. So that's a single image, ultimately could be 4.75 terabytes. Append blobs are also there, and they're optimized for append operations, example for login. Now, you may see that difference between blob creation and append blobs, and that's just important from that perspective. Page blobs, on the flip side, these are for read-write operations. Think of your VM disks here. These are used by Azure VMs, and these can be up to 8 terabytes in size. Which leads us on to the next thing that we need to cover, which are storage tiers. We've decided now that we want to use blob storage and store a bunch of images, but what's the right tier to go for? Well, the first one we look at is hot storage. This has our highest storage costs, but our lowest access costs. So think of this for frequently accessed images that we might be utilizing in our application, or maybe website content, things like that, accessed very periodically. Then we have cold storage. This has lower storage costs now, but higher access costs. And it is possible to move from cold to hot and hot to cold, as you'll see in some of the demos. But what you do incur is a storage cost penalty when you do that, because if you're moving from cold to hot, immediately you're going to pay those higher access costs for accessing the cold storage as you move it to hot. So even though you can move them around, it's best to aim to use the right tier of storage for your purpose. And if you look at cold, it's really intended for data that will remain cool for 30 days or more to be cost effective. Finally, we have archive storage as well. This has our lowest storage costs, but our highest retrieval costs. When a blob is in archive storage, it is offline, and so it cannot be read. And this is really because it's pushed off to tape or some other archive type storage that Microsoft uses on the back end. So if you decide you want to access something in archive storage, there is a period of time as that has to get rehydrated back so you can access it. Now, ultimately, just pick the right storage for your use case. And if you decide, okay, well, sometimes things go into hot storage and then eventually I want them to go to cold or eventually to archive, it is possible to enforce some auto tiering around this that will gradually move, unaccessed blobs from hot, down to cold, down to archive. And there's various automation techniques in Azure that allow this to take place. Finally, let's just take a look at the decision criteria as we try to choose between blobs, files, and disks. Often this gets very confusing. So if we break it down, blobs themselves, this is for storing large amounts of objects. Again, images, videos, etc. We might want to access them from anywhere. Just lots and lots of images, videos, text files, etc. that might be accessed. Then we've got files, so think of these as more from accessing from multiple machines, jump box scenarios. Maybe you've got a remote desktop that somebody wants to store a root user profile on. That's a good scenario. And then finally, we have disks. So these are really associated with our virtual machines attached to the operating system. Think of this for like lift and shift scenarios. When we're moving from on-premises, we might be doing disk expansion for application installations, lots and lots of read writes. That's when we would ultimately use disks themselves. Now that concludes the overview, and I encourage you to check out the subsequent demo, especially as we kind of build blob storage accounts and move images around. You'll get a lot of feel for everything that we've covered thus far. In this demonstration, we're now going to cover creating a storage account via the Azure portal. So let's flip straight over to Azure. Here we are in Azure, and the first thing we're going to do is on the left, just go ahead and create a new resource group. So select Resource Groups, select Add at the top, and type in your resource group name. So in my case, I'm going to use SL-storage. Choose your subscription and the resource group location. Again, this is just for metadata for the resource group itself. You can still put your storage account in any region you like. And go ahead and create that. The reason we do this and create our own resource group here is we can put all our storage accounts in there for demonstration purposes. Just delete the resource group when you're done, and you've ultimately wiped everything out straight away. So within a few seconds, that should be created if we hit refresh here. And there we go, SL-storage. Now we're going to that resource group, and let's go in here and create a new storage account. So go ahead and select Add, type in storage account. You'll see it'll come up there, storage account, blob, file, table, queue, because that's what we can store in there. And go ahead and select that, create. And now we'll get the blade for creating our storage account. So first of all, let's go ahead and give it a name. So in my case, I'm going to use SL-storage demo. And as you can see, this is a publicly addressable namespace that we need here, so it has to be unique. Then we choose the deployment model. For everything in this course, we'll ultimately be using the resource manager model, as you've probably seen so far. And then we get onto the storage account type. So if we go ahead and hit the drop down here, we can see we have storage, storage v2, and blob storage. And ultimately now everything we do, we're going to use a storage v2 account. Now you notice some of the options change below. If we go back and choose storage gv1, we don't get that option for the tier straight away. Go switch back to it again. And you can see that there we get a default access tier. And this is because we can set a tier of storage at the storage account level, which will apply to all the objects underneath it. Now we can still change the individual blobs to have their own access tier, but this is quite a nice feature because we can say, okay, everything we want here, we might want cool, we might want hot. In my case, I'm going to choose hot, and everything underneath it will apply to. Then we can choose our performance. So we've got standard and premium, much like when we talked about virtual machine disks. You know, we can choose SSD type storage or standard spinning disk. In our case here, we'll just go for standard for the purposes of this demo. Next, we need to look at replication options, and we have the same four that we covered in the virtual machine section. LRS, which is a locally redundant storage. This is 3 copies locally in the same data center. We have ZRS, which is zone redundant storage. This is in preview currently. Still 3 copies, but in a zone-based region, so a couple of data centers in the same region. Geo-redundant storage, which is GRS. This is 6 copies across multiple regions. And finally, RA-GRS, which is read access geo-redundant storage that allows us to replicate to another region and actually read data there. It's basically warm and ready for us to access. In our case here, we'll simply select LRS. Next, we choose our access tier, as we already discussed. We're going to use the hot tier. And then we have options around secure transfer. If we open up the information on this one, this allows us to enforce encryption options for when we access data from the storage account. For the purposes of this demo, we'll just choose disabled, choose your subscription, and select the resource group we just created previously. Finally, scroll down, select your location. In my case, I'm going to continue to use North Central US, and choose disabled for virtual networks. This option, which will be covered in the networking section, is around virtual service endpoints, and that allows us to say, take a storage account, and instead of exposing it over the internet, we can expose it directly through a virtual network. And this is a way for security teams to buy off on the fact that, we have blob storage out there that's only inside of the Azure private network itself. With all those options selected, go ahead and click Create, and then we'll fast forward here. It should take about a minute for your account to be created, and we'll transition to once that's completed. As you can see, after a period of time, the storage account is now created, and we can go ahead and select it. Once it opens up, you can see the performance that we chose, which is standard, the replication set to LRS, and our account, which is set to GPv2. And then at the bottom, you can see our various services. So we've got blobs, files, tables, queues. If we wanted to go ahead and upload blobs, we could go into the blob section, create our container, and upload it from here. But you'll see in a subsequent demo, as we use Storage Explorer, how you can upload lots of blob images and manage your storage account from there. And with that, this concludes this demonstration. In this demo, we're now going to create a storage account via PowerShell. So let's head straight over to our PowerShell client. And let's begin. The first thing we need to do is make sure we have the right version of the Azure RM module available. You can check your current version by typing in get module space dash list available Azure RM. And once you hit enter, you'll see there module type script version 4.4.0. And you just need to make sure that you have version 3.6 or higher for you to be able to create storage accounts using PowerShell. The next thing we're going to need is our resource group, which we created already when we did it via the portal. So let's go ahead and do a get Azure RM resource group. And we can see there that we still have our resource group, SL-storage, and the metadata being in North Central US. Let's go ahead now and store that resource group in a variable. So let's type $resource group name equals SL-storage. Hit enter. And now it's time for us to go ahead and create our new storage account. So use the following command to new-Azure RM storage account. Then hit dash resource group name. You can start typing it in and it will fill it in for you. The variable for resource group name, followed by the name of our storage account, so dash name. I'm going to use SL storage PShell here to identify it as a different one from the one we created in the UI. Now we need to define the location, so we'll use North Central US. Next we need the SKU, so this is where we choose the type of disk and the type of replication we want. So if you type in dash SKU name, and then follow that up and type in, say, standard, and start tabbing through these. You can see you've got standard GRS, standard LRS, standard RAGRS, etc. And if you type premium in the beginning, it'll give you the LRS option, which is currently the only option for the premium disks. But if we go ahead and choose standard LRS there, and then finally choose the kind, in this case, we're going to use storage as opposed to blob. Go ahead and hit enter. And we'll fast forward here. After a minute or so, you should see that complete. And in a little while, you'll get a screen like this to show that everything's completed and there's some details around the storage account itself. But let's now just go straight over to the Azure portal. And if we go over to our resource group, and do a refresh. In fact, we already see it there. So we've got SL storage PShell. Select that one there. And we can see at the top that we've created a standard LRS storage GPV version 1 storage account in this case. And if we want to, we can use PowerShell also to upgrade that to version 2. But let's just go over and select configuration from the settings panel on the left. And there you'll see immediately it shows the account kind as storage general purpose version 1. And if we want to, this is another place we can simply hit upgrade. Go ahead and confirm the upgrade. And to do that, you need to type in the account name. So in this case, it's SL storage PShell. Select upgrade. And that will go ahead and upgrade your storage account. And you can now see it is set to version 2. And with that, this concludes this demonstration. All right, time for another demonstration. And now that we've created a lot of our storage accounts, whether we did it via the portal or via PowerShell, it's now time for us to be able to browse that storage and maybe upload objects, etc. to it. And so we're going to use the Storage Explorer client to do that. In order to begin, you first need to download the client, which you can find on the Azure website. If you head over to azure.microsoft.com/en-us/features/storage-explorer, or just Google Azure Storage Explorer, you'll be presented with this page. There's a Windows client, a Mac OS client, and a Linux client. Go ahead and download Storage Explorer free by selecting the link at the bottom after you've selected your OS. And once that's installed, we'll continue with this demonstration. Okay, so once Storage Explorer is installed and you'll immediately be prompted to run it, go ahead and do that and you'll be presented with the screen. You have a number of ways that you can log in and browse your storage. You can simply add an Azure account directly. You can use a connection string or a shared access signature that we'll learn about later on in the module here. And you can always use your storage account name and key as well. But in our case, we're just going to sign in by selecting sign in on the bottom here. And this will sign us in the usual prompt to sign into our Azure account. Okay, once that's added, simply select apply, and then you can see all of the various storage accounts. So in our case, we created a SL storage demo, first of all via the portal, and then we created one via PowerShell. So we can expand these out here and see what's inside them. Again, we really don't have anything in them at the moment, but you kind of get the idea there. Now, what we can do is add some files directly to that. So we can take some images, for example, and then go ahead and select the blob container section under your storage account. So if we right-click there and click Create a New Blob Container, call this one Images. And on the right-hand side now, we see we have this upload option. So we can go ahead and select that, click Upload Files. Now I'm simply going to select a folder full of files. I've got an image sample on my desktop, so I'm going to select all of these, select Open, and go ahead and select Upload. And what you'll see is this begin to start here in a moment. And on the bottom, if we expand this out, we can see the group of images it's uploading, how many are complete, and you can see they're appearing in the top pane there as each one is uploaded. And so you can see the flexibility. It's just like managing a file share on your own machine, where you can create images, delete images, etc., create new folders. If you want to get a URL from them, if you want to rename them, you've got these whole series of options available to you on the top there. The other thing as well is if we go over to the Azure portal and look in our same storage account, so SL storage demo, we also have an option there, Open in Explorer. So if we go ahead and select this and click Yes, you'll see it'll switch apps and open directly in Storage Explorer as well. So this is another quick shortcut. If you're in the Azure portal and you want to open up in Storage Explorer, you can simply do that and it'll take you right across there. And with that, this concludes this demonstration. We're definitely covering a lot of details around storage here, and you might be thinking, are there other tools that Microsoft makes available to copy files, perhaps between blob storage accounts and different accounts, perhaps from your local machine to a storage account, etc. So let's walk you through a little bit of a demonstration here. But to begin, you first need to go ahead and download the tool AZ-Copy from the Microsoft website. So here we are on the Microsoft website, and the first thing you need to go to is the Getting Started with AZ-Copy webpage, which we've linked here for you as well. And this again is the command line utility that you can use to copy blobs or files to or from a storage account. Now you will notice that AZ-Copy version 10 is the currently supported version. There was a version 8.1, and that was actually covered previously in my courses, but this is now updated to version 10. Everything we're going to do from here on out is version 10, so make sure you get in version 10 if you're following along. And what you need to do is scroll down. You'll see download AZ-Copy, and you've got your Windows, your Linux, your Mac OS options here, and it's an executable file. There's nothing you need to install. What will happen is when you click this download link here and click save, it will download a zip file to your machine. Go ahead and open that folder, and what you will see when you open up the zip file, in the folder inside it, there's azcopy.exe, and again, all you need to do is copy that to somewhere you can execute that from. Very quickly, if you're not too familiar on Windows and how you do environment variables, I'll show you how I've done it in my case. So if I go to my C drive and I go to AZ-Copy, I created a folder called AZ-Copy, and I just copied that exe file straight in here. And then what I also did was change my environment variables so I can execute it from anywhere. In Windows, you can just hit the Start menu and type environment. And you'll see it says Edit the System Environment Variables. Click in that, and then click in Environment Variables at the bottom. You'll see here you have your user variables. These apply only to you on your machine, and your system variables that apply to everyone. In my case, if I scroll down in system variables, you'll see a section called path, And if you click path and click edit, this is all the locations that you can execute from directly. In my case, at the bottom, I've got C:\\AZ copy. If you want to put it in a different folder, that's absolutely fine. You can browse to that folder when you want to execute, or you can just add it to your path by clicking the new button on the top here and put it in. So if you put it in C:\temp or something, you would just put that in there, wherever you basically put it in, and then you'll be good to go. But I'm going to cancel out of that now, cancel out here, and open up a command prompt to show you how it works. And I've also saved a number of pre-filled in commands that I'm going to use throughout this demonstration. And so I've got them here in a text file. I've got AZ copy login to my tenant ID. That's the first thing we're going to do. Now, you don't have to always put the tenant ID in. You can just do AZ copy login, but it will go to a default tenant, and you might get an error if you're not authorized in that tenant. In my case, I want to specifically log into this Azure Active Directory tenant, and that's why I've got the tenant ID there. If you haven't covered Azure Active Directory already, you can jump ahead and learn more about Azure AD, but otherwise just make sure you put your tenant ID in for the tenant you're trying to log into, and you will be just fine. We're then going to run through a number of other commands, which I'll talk you through, but for now, let's just go ahead and log in. So I'm going to open my command prompt. I'm going to type in AZ copy, just to verify that I can actually grab the file. And you can see that it does work. It comes up to show me that I've got available commands, even though I'm not in the AZ copy directory. Again, I put that in my C drive under AZ copy, and there's our exe file. That's basically what's executing every time I type AZ copy. But let's go ahead and log into that tenant. So I'm going to go grab my login command here and paste that in, and that will now log in. And you'll see it says, go ahead to this page, Microsoft.com/device login. So if we browse over there, and then enter the code that's in the command prompt. So here we go, grab this code and enter it in. And that now logs me in with Azure AD authentication. You can also log in, as you'll see on that page, using a SaaS token if you prefer. That's another option. But in my case, I'm just going to log in with Azure AD here to keep things simple. Okay, so that's logged in. If I go back to my command prompt, and we can see login succeeded. And so now the next thing we need to do is just show you the layout of the lab area I've got for this one. So in the Azure portal now, I've created 2 storage accounts for this. These are simple storage accounts. One is in North Central US. One is in East US 2, one is called AZ Copy Demo, the other one is called AZ Copy Demo Target, and we're going to use them for different use cases. If I click into the first one, we're going to look at AZ Copy Demo. You'll see here that it's just running on LRS storage, so locally redundant storage. It's on the standard hot tier, and it's a GPV version 2 storage account, and that's all we really need to know about it. It's just a basic GPv2 storage account that I can then copy into. If I go into the blob section of services, I can create my container, and we'll create one here, and we'll just call it test container. And we'll say private, no anonymous access for this container, and click OK. So there's our test container. And now before I can start copying files in there, there's one other thing I need to do, which is make sure I have the storage blob contributor rights assigned. So if I go to access control and I go in here and click role assignments, and then go ahead and add a role assignment, add role assignment. And you'll see a select a role, and you can type in blob. It's probably the easiest way to get this. And you've got storage blob data contributor. Now, even though I'm a global admin, even though I'm a subscription admin, even though I created the storage account, Microsoft does now require that you specifically give access as storage blob data contributor in order to copy files into Blob Storage. And that's a recent change, but a very welcome one, because they want to make sure that all the data services are locked down by default, and you have to explicitly give permission for them. So we do need to add this role, and I'm going to go in and add myself to that role and click save and let that propagate as well. That can take up to 5 minutes to take effect. And while that's going on, let's go ahead and look at the files we're going to be copying over. So if I go to AZ copy on my C drive and then go up one folder, I've got an images folder, and in there you can see I've got 3 images, 1, 2, 3 here, and I've got a subfolder called images subfolder. And if we go in there, you can see I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 images in there as well. If I go back to my storage account and go back to that container, so if I scroll down, go to the blob service, and then select the container, test container, I don't have anything there presently. Now I've saved all my commands, ready to go, and we're going to use this one, AZ copy, the command task action we want to take, :/images, and you can see the star there, so that indicates I want to copy everything in that directory, and I'm going to put it in AZ copy demo, that's our storage account, .blob.core.windows.net, because I'm not using any custom domain for that storage account, and I want to put it in the test container that we've created. So let's go ahead and give that a shot in the command prompt. Okay, here I am back in my command prompt. I'm going to paste that command in and hit enter. And we can see it's copying 3 files up there right now. Now you might be asking why only 3. Well, we'll come back to that in a second. Let's go back over to the portal and just verify those 3 images went across. And if we refresh our container, yep, we can see 1, 2, 3 images there. Now if we go back to our command and we simply add recursive switch to the command and hit enter, it will now go through the folder that we're copying from, look through the subfolders and copy those in as well. That's completed. If I go back to the portal, refresh, you can see I've got that images subfolder in there now, and I've got those additional images inside there as well. Well, now what if we want to copy all of this from this blob storage and container over to the other one in the other region? Well, let's go ahead and go back. We also need to give rights to that other blob account. So we'll go back to our storage accounts. I'm going to go to AZ copy demo target, identity and access management again, add that role assignment, click add, role assignment. Remember, it's blob contributor that you need. And I'm going to assign myself to this storage account and click save. And now there's one more catch. So even though I've got rights on the target, and we know I can copy files from a local machine to a target using my Azure AD authentication, unfortunately Microsoft doesn't yet allow you to copy from the source without a SAS token using AZ copy. So what we need to do is go back again to our other storage account, select AZ copy demo, and then scroll down and select shared access signature. And we can choose all the services for now, but if you were doing this in an enterprise where you wanted to restrict, you would typically just create the SAS token for the services you need. But in my case, I don't need to worry about that. The only thing I just want to make sure of is that I do choose a time in the past here. So I always typically go back a day and then go ahead and generate my SAS token. And I'm not going to use any of the other settings, but just to clarify in case anyone's wondering, so this is allowed IP addresses, so this is sources that can use that SAS token. Here are protocol options for HTTPS only or HTTPS and HTTP, and this is our signing key again, so key 1 or key 2. And I can regenerate those keys. If I scroll back up on the left hand side, I can generate access keys in the access keys section, but obviously regenerating the key invalidates all the SAS tokens that were created with that key. But with that, we've got our SAS token, so I can copy this, which I'll grab here and paste that into my command. And we'll just scroll back and check that's okay. Yep, add an extra question mark there, which we already had, so I'll get rid of that. And then what I also need to do is add the source container, in my case, test container / and then we get our SAS token after that. So if we scroll through the beginning, we've got AZ copy. We want to copy everything from AZ copy demo. in the test container with this SAS token that we just generated. Scroll all the way across, and we're copying to az copy demo target.blob.core.windows.net in test container as well. And if you haven't already done that, you do need to create a test container in the new storage account as well. And you can do that using the command az copy make. In my case, I can grab this command and paste that in, and we just need to change the storage account to be the target one, in my case, so az copy make. And in the target storage account, I want to create test container. Hit enter, and that is created. Now I grab my other command on the bottom here and paste that in, and let's see if it copies everything across. And that looks good. There's 7 penned-in files. They're already copied across. And if I go to the portal, select the target storage account, scroll down and choose the Blob service, and you can see we have the exact same thing now in the target account in the other region. Test container inside there, 3 images here, 1, 2, 3, and our images subfolder in here as well. And we can click into one of these just to see what it is and download that one directly. Grab that there, and we should see one of our beautiful images that we used here for our demonstration. So with that, that concludes the demonstration on AZ Copy. I do encourage you to go back to the website and just make yourself aware of the different commands and how to use them. You can click Use with Blobs here and scroll down, and you'll see a lot of examples very similar to the ones I've just gone through here with you. How to upload an individual file, a directory, how to copy from a storage account to another. Just take note of the notes sections, because there are those limitations that currently exist. As you saw when we're using Azure AD authentication, I can authenticate to copy to the target, but when I'm copying from my source storage account, I do need to use a SAS token. So make sure you're aware of SAS tokens, make sure you know how to use them, and hopefully this demonstration reinforces that for you as well. And with that, that's the end of AZ Copy. Let's go ahead now in this demonstration and create and manage our shared access signatures. So let's head over to the Azure portal, and in the portal we're going to use the storage account SAS demo. So we'll select that one, and in there on the left hand side you can see we have our access keys and shared access signature. So I'm going to show you access keys first of all. This is very important because you have 2 access keys associated with your storage account, and if you want to at any point you can regenerate your keys. Now the reason they give you 2 is because if you need to regenerate your key, you can move everything over to key 2, make sure everything's working, then regenerate key 1, because what happens is when you regenerate your keys, all those shared access signatures that we create will no longer work. Now if we go over to shared access signature, we can now create one for, let's say, our blob store. So we can say, okay, we want to allow services for blob, but we don't want file, queue, and table. We're going to give full permissions to the resource. And if we scroll down now, we select the start and expiration date. So hopefully you saw in the previous module description around our shared access signatures, this is where it'll create that start and end time. And sometimes it helps just to create one an hour in the past for your start time, so you know it's immediately going to be accessible, actually even further, just depending on your time zone if you're worried about that. You next have a section on allowed IP addresses. So if we want to restrict access to specific IP addresses, we can do that here. This could be a single IP or it can be a range. Our allowed protocols, so HTTPS only is the most common. And then you can see at the bottom here, we have the signing key. So we can choose to sign this shared access signature with key 1 or key 2. And as long as we don't regenerate that key, this shared access signature will continue to work. So let's go ahead, let's use key 1, let's generate the SAS. And if we scroll further down, you can see our SAS token and our specific blob service SAS URL. So we could grab this token now, if I hit it there, go ahead and put it into one of our images that we have in already loaded. And let's go ahead and grab that image.jpg, paste our token there at the end, and our image comes up using the SAS token that we've created. But this can obviously be a little bit cumbersome because, we've got to now manage this shared access signature. Would have created 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 of these. How do we sort of deal with that? And so the policies that I mentioned previously are a great way to do this. And if we go over to Storage Explorer, in Storage Explorer, we can right click our container and we can select Manage Access Policies. So in the section, we can create a new access policy. We can give it a name, so let's call it Images 1 Day as an example. We'll start it today, we'll end it to 2018 in this example. I choose the permissions again at this point, and I select Save. Now, by itself, the policy doesn't actually do anything. What I need to do is when I create my shared access signature from Storage Explorer, I can reference that specific policy. So now if I go back over to the container, right click it and choose Get Shared Access Signature. At this point, I can drop down and select my access policy, and it's going to put in the start and the expiration time as well as the permissions that I selected in the policy, and I can go ahead and create that. And now I get that shared access signature, which ultimately is referencing, you can see there in the query string, the policy. And the good thing now is if I want to change the expiration date, I can simply go ahead and change the policy, and that's ultimately going to expire the shared access signature because it's relying on that policy. And with that, hopefully this gives you an idea of how you can control access to your containers, images, etc. using shared access signatures, but in combination with policy.